Alright, what's going on, my Kaiser Pups and Cineslups? We're on to episode 5 of the review of Joe Exotic. Today I'm sporting a wolf t-shirt, a little bit different, but you know, they had wolves on Joe Exotic as well, so I'll go with that. So I'm going to start this review with, like I was saying earlier, I was going to respond to some of the comments that you guys had left about the last review and the last episode, or throughout whatever part of the season you guys left your reviews about it or comments. So the first one up is Alex. So you started off with saying how hard this show was to watch after each episode, and I'm absolutely agree with you. Like I said, after that 4th episode, I almost just stopped watching altogether, but I kind of wanted to see how this all played out. And I like your comparison to Making a Murderer, because it's kind of it turns into it at that point, with how Joe becomes so obsessed with Carol. You see less and less about the animals and more so about how his plot is to kind of take out Carol for his own personal gain. Now, like, your comments kind of help lead into the review of the 5th episode, so good for you. And then you also bring up, I was kind of like I do in all these, I ramble about things, but you were saying, you brought up a good point that no one was going to stop Joe from his spiraling, his whole mentality of keeping people there, and especially keeping his husbands with the meth that he's on. There was no way anyone was going to stop him. Even with Rick, even though he was, I think, one of the most sane people out of all this, his whole ideal of keeping the cameras rolling and everything, he wasn't going to do anything to step in, because why would he step in the way? Why would he shoot himself in the foot of making money off of this crazy man? Joe picked people on purpose. He picked the people that are downtrodden, down and out, and were addicted to meth or any type of drugs or any codependence on someone. And that's how his whole cult mentality formed. He had the cult. He had the old codependence idea that I'll supply you with this, but you have to stick with me. And that's how he kept everyone around. Again, they were probably afraid, like you were saying, afraid to either be shot, fired, or anything like that. He would, especially in this 5th episode, you see how unraveled he became, and how terrifying it probably was to go against him. So that's why they stayed. And I think you brought up a great point with that, saying, why would anyone step in front of him? Why would they take what they already have and ruin it, or ruin themselves? Just because they can see Joe's going in the wrong direction, but there's no way to derail that train at that point. And then you also mentioned Joe wasn't helping himself by being addicted to fame and celebrity, but the media wasn't going to help with that at all. Rick Kirkman being one of them, or anything with like his political campaign. His whole thing was being addicted to fame at that point, and having that platform, one with his TV show, and 2 with especially this 5th episode, the political campaign. He needed something to fuel that addiction and fuel his admiration for what he's doing. And you're seeing the entire time that he's not doing it for the animals at this point. He's doing it for his own, and I keep saying addiction because it's an addiction to his fame and his whole online persona at this point. And I think the person says keep the cameras rolling. I think he actually says at that point. It's him and Rick, I think, both mention at some point that he keep the cameras rolling, because he thinks if he keeps it rolling, people are going to see a good side into his life and think, oh wow, look at what Joe's doing, look how great he is at this point, he's really doing a lot for himself and everything like that. But I don't know if it was more so he's filming it to make it show people that what he's doing is actually helping animals and stuff like that, or he's doing it to kind of feed his own ego, which I'm assuming to a point he's feeding his own ego to kind of help himself out through any issues that he's having in his life. Let's see, I'm just kind of reading everything that you wrote. You say you don't like the series in a whole. I think I would agree with that. I don't like how they kind of. They had to show how they wanted to show, because that's how they're going to bring in viewers and everything like that. Their whole thing, and I think Victoria brought it up to me, was that they were supposed to film this like Blackfish in a sense. You're not familiar with Blackfish. It was pretty much exposing SeaWorld for how they were treating their animals and everything like that. They do touch on points here and there and how they're treating their animals, but they really don't show too much about the animals at this point. They're showing more so the deconstruction of who Joe is and what he's become throughout all this. They're not really showing the livelihood of any of the animals, not even, more so they're just using the tigers as a backdrop for the craziness of who Joe Exotic is, which I get, that's how you're going to bring viewers in and everything, but they're not really bringing up the points of how these animals are treated or what these roadside zoos and everything are doing to bring these animals in, how they're keeping their businesses run, which I think should have been a point that they should have made. They should have shown how they're keeping it run and everything like that. Yeah, they showed a little bit of how he brought in investors and everything like that, but they aren't showing the daily day-to-day and how these animals are actually being kept and treated and sold and bought and everything like that. But you were right, they show less and less about any of the animals. It's just more so Joe is this character, and that's what they're going to focus on. And you say, how can you rank the worst? Again, another good question, another one brought up. I think it's just for me, it's just personal. It's not personal to me because I don't know any of these people, but personal more so in the sense, Joe, I'm not more so against than anyone else, or it's more so Carol and Rick, because they're both in a position where they could be doing something and they're not doing something about it. Joe and Doc and Jeff, you know who they are right out from the bat. They're not good people. They're not out there for anything good. They're out there for their own personal gain. Carol's in a position where she should be doing something good for it, and she's not doing it. And Rick is also in a position that he could have been helping Joe to a point, or helping take down what his organization is, but they're both at a point where they don't want to. They want their own, more so Carol want their own fame and monetary value from what they're doing. But I think that's also a good point. How can you really rank everyone, because they all have their own terrible characteristics with everything. Another good point, you're saying there is no improvement for the situation of what's going on. No matter what, you're right, no matter what's going on, people are going to see big cats, they're going to see big apex predators, and they're going to control them, because that's human nature. We are the top species in a lot of senses, and people are going to control what they think they can control is below them. They didn't really touch it. The series didn't really touch on the trade of the animals, besides like maybe some cubs were given here, some cubs were given there, some animals were given here. They don't touch on how to stop that, or what could be done to combat stopping that, or what's in place at this point besides the Big Cat Endangered Act, I think, was the official title, or somewhat of the official title for it. But they didn't really delve into what that act would do or how that act would get involved. No matter what's going to happen, these animals will be bought, sold, treated terribly, and they're just at the end they're going to go extinct. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There's a lot of conservation going on about it, but again, they didn't show any of that. They didn't show what is being done outside of these worlds and what can be helped to be brought into these worlds, about the education of what can be done to help these animals further down the line. You do mention that the most densely populated areas where these animals are. So yeah, like India and Africa for the lions and tigers and stuff like that. Like these areas are just getting more and more encroached. And like you're saying, there's going to be Jeff Lowe's out there. There's going to be people that have all this abundant money, and what can they do but blow it on big extravagant things? And the first thing they'll look at is animals, because they want a cool pet to show off how much money they have. But I think you Alex, you brought up a lot of good points, and I don't think I answered them too well at that point, at any bit. But I think the fact that you're creating a conversation about all this, and the fact that you can look at it when you're not too tied to it at this point, is great. And I'm hoping that's what the show brings to a lot of people, is that they're talking about it, they're going out and discussing it and everything, and maybe re-looking at their ways of life, and re-looking at what the lives of other people are doing, and maybe what they can do to help out with it. So moving on, next is Kate's comments on it. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Every single one of them are dirtbags, Kate. There's no silver lining, like I think I said the last episode, for any of these people. There's no one that you can really. There's a few that I think you look at that like have good intentions, but the main people they focus on, no matter what, they're all terrible people. There's nothing good that they're doing at this point. And they're profiting off the animal suffering, he said, and that's absolutely right. No matter, these animals aren't having a happy life. I mean, what do we know? Into their minds, we don't know if they're actually enjoying anything they're doing, but all this profit is coming off of their loss, which is it's upsetting. There's no sugarcoating it. It's beyond upsetting to see that animals being tortured and maimed and everything like that, but people are still supporting these people no matter what, even with all these videos put out there and everything. And I hope, again, that this show shows a little bit more to people, just see what you're actually supporting when you're supporting zoos like this. You're right, Doc was investigated at the end. I still haven't seen too much about if he's being shut down at all or anything like that, but I mean, you would hope with him being interviewed, even the little bit that he is being interviewed, the FBI would take a little more gain in wanting to be like, look, let's take out this guy. Joe's already in jail. Why not we keep adding to the pile? But I think you're absolutely right, that every single one of them are scumbags. There's nothing good about them. Next up is JFK. You're right, that the show was crazy enough, and I think that's what the producers wanted. They wanted someone that was so crazy. They could have focused on a million different roadside zoos and stuff like that, but they found the most eccentric man they possibly could to keep people wanting to watch it constantly. And the only reason, I think you're right, I don't think I'd ever watch this again. The only reason I'm watching the episodes again is to take a little more notes on it, just so I can kind of explain a little bit more my opinion on it. And I think it's great that you don't go to zoos or anything like that. I think that's a smart move for anyone. I mean, there are certain zoos out there, like I mentioned before, the Elmwood Zoo. It's a really great conservation zoo because they're bringing in animals that aren't being... most of the time, I think they only have like a few animals here and there that they brought in for... they had like breeding from other zoos. So they brought in some cubs, but most of the animals they're bringing in are injured or sick, and they're trying to keep them in an area because there's no way they're getting released back into it. But for the most part, most zoos aren't doing anything to really help out these animals. Yeah, they might be raising some money for conservation, but the whole thing is, why breed these animals if you aren't going to release them back into the wild? And I think for most of you, and I think Joe brings out a great point, that most of you, I'm going to assume, aren't following what the wildlife conservationists are doing or what big moves are out here. And I think it's great that this show may have opened up your eyes a little bit more to what's going on out there and what you possibly can do for it and what is actually going on. It creates a conversation. Conversation is the biggest thing here. If we don't have conversation going, no one's going to know what's going on with it. Your next point, I think you put up that you said you thought it was kind of scripted. I don't know how much it scripted in a sense, but yeah, maybe some of the shots were definitely set up to make it more dramatic, because again, you want people coming in here. You mentioned the lawyer's office. I think Joe kept that in there. I think he did it on purpose. I mean, I think, again, it was set up to a point to make it so entertaining that people are going to want to watch it. But I don't think more so it was scripted. I think he did it on purpose to kind of gain some more views with it. And the fat Chucky doll looking guy, the great comment. I forget, I think it's lower down. I think his name is Josh or something like that. But yeah, he knows what he's doing. He's intentionally saying things to get people drawn into him and being more interested into him on the show. But again, I don't think so much it's scripted. I think, yeah, there were certain shots that were set up, but I think Joe knew what he was doing. So I don't, again, scripted possibly, but I don't think so personally. And all the film they had, I'm gonna assume that it's from his YouTube and what Rick was filming, because obviously a lot of it was lost. So I think they had cameras rolling constantly. So either he was filming or someone on the show was filming. So I think that's how they had all these backed up videos from everything. But again, good for you saying you opened up your eyes a little bit more, and I'm hoping maybe my reviews in a small sense kind of help all of you kind of think a little bit more. I mean, I'm in no sense know everything that's going on out there. I'm still removed from a point. I'm out of school. I'm not doing as much research as I was when I was in school. I'd like to get back into it, and I think with this is helping me a little bit more, wanting to do it, just so I feel a little more connected to what's going on as well. Let's see. And then Allie, great question on what's actually in my cup. It's coffee. It's all coffee. I'm working during the week most of the time, so I can't really be drinking at all. The last episode, I most likely will be drinking just to kind of get through that last episode and talk about how it'll be the weekend, so I'll be willing to. But yeah, great question. What's in the mug? That's one of those behind-the-scenes questions. I like it a lot. But yeah, not absinthe, as I do like absinthe. Yes, it is pretty good. Whiskey, which will be in my cup when I do talk about the 7th episode. I'm trying to get a guest star onto it, guest appearance from someone on it. Bet you can't guess who. But yeah, so it'll be whiskey in my mug the last time you guys see me on this one. So let's dive into the 5th episode, even though I've rambled beyond belief for the past 15 minutes, and I'm sure none of it made any sense. So they open up on Doc's I like how they always kind of just pepper in Doc to make it seem like he's not as bad as what Joe's doing. So they open up with the chimp birthday party. He's like, it's just like a 5-year-old birthday party. Yeah, I get what you're trying to do. You're trying to personalize these animals and make them seem like they're part of your family and everything like that. But again, your whole thing is that you're running a conservation center. You shouldn't be promoting the fact that these animals could be put on display like a 5-year-old's birthday party. There's nothing beneficial about you doing that. And then he even explains he's trying to like show these animals off as care and cuddling, and he's like, don't get too close to them, they'll rip your fingers off. So you're contradicting yourself in the same breath as you're saying that, oh, we should protect these animals, but also they're fun, but also they'll kill you, but also you could own them. What's the point of contradicting yourself at that point if you're running this area and you don't want people to be owning animals, but you also want people to come see how close you are? I just don't get it. His whole thing, he's showing off, and he talks about how he has all these social media followers now because he has such unique content. Yeah, it's unique because you shouldn't be owning this. The reason people are watching so much is because it's almost, some of it I think is because people are watching because it's a train wreck of showing how much of a hypocrite this guy is. But then you're also caring about your social media impact. I don't think your social media impact's doing anything to help out the conservation efforts that you're doing. People aren't coming there to learn more about the animals. They're coming there to hopefully handle the animals. Nothing about what he's doing is helping out conservation efforts at this point. It's just his and everyone, him, Carol, and Joe's, it's their whole social media impact, just so they can bring in more money for themselves. This episode was kind of hard for me to take any notes on or do anything with, because a lot of it, again, like Alex had brought up earlier, it doesn't really focus on any of the animals, so my expertise isn't really going to show through, I think, in any of this. So I'm going to try to chug my way through this episode. The next 2 episodes kind of touch on a lot of the animal issues because of the whole, I'm not going to ruin it for anyone that hasn't watched it, but there's more law issues with some of the animals and some of the stuff he's doing that I think I can do a little bit more on. But so Joe, they also open up with Joe saying Jeff conned everyone. Joe's just degrading Jeff through the whole conversation and everything, and he's like bringing up like, oh, Jeff has all these criminal issues and stuff like that, and thinks he'll go to jail, which I think is beyond ironic because you're talking about it while you're in jail. He's trying to make himself seem like a martyr again in the situation of something that you know inherently you're doing wrong. Yet Jeff went to jail and he's bringing in these animals and everything like that, but originally he was just having these animals to have these animals. He wasn't trying to, I think, make a personal gain off it until he bought out the zoo, or kind of bought into the zoo. Don't put yourself above Jeff when you're on the same level as him. You kind of start seeing the park dynamic switching at this point because Jeff starts taking more of a leadership role, and Joe only kind of takes on the entertainment role, which says a lot at that point. Joe shouldn't be willing, if he's caring about these animals so much, be willing to take such a down step, even though he thinks it's a promotion because he gets to entertain everything. He knows, he I don't know where I'm going with that, but it's just the idea that Joe is okay with being the entertainment director as opposed to being someone that's being an educator on the animals that are actually there. Jeff's only really there because he wants to play, he wants to work, he doesn't want to work, sorry, he wants to play, he doesn't want to work at all. He's all there for just playing with the cats, and I think that should have been a trigger point to Joe to see, like, okay, this is an issue. Someone that's willing to buy into the zoo isn't willing to help us out. He's just here for his own personal gain. But he thinks the entire time that Jeff's here to make everything better, and the only thing he thinks doing better is because he has his money to fight Carol. If that's your only train of thought, that you're going to help fight Carol, that's not helping you. It is to take care of Carol, but it's not helping you in a sense of making sure your mental state and your involvement with these animals is any better. It's just making it worse, I think, at that point, because now you're not in any control of who you are and what you're doing with these animals. Jeff later on in the episode ends up firing everyone, and again, that should have been such a big going off point to think. Joe should have been like, okay, this is an issue. I brought in all these people for a reason so I could control them, but maybe he doesn't think he's controlling me. But I brought in all these people to help support me, and now I just lost that complete support staff. What am I going to do about this? And he just keeps putting it into Jeff's hands, which is such an issue. And then they bring in Alan, which Alan becomes really big in the last episode, mainly last 2 episodes, really. But it's this whole mentality, bringing in another misfit. He's just a guy that's a handyman for a zoo. He has no idea on the animal. He's been in and out of prison, which I guess Joe was hoping bringing this guy in from Jeff would be like, okay, this is just another worker that I'm used to, so this should be a good idea. There should be no issues with it. But I mean, they butt heads the entire time, and I go into a little bit further down, and then this episode just jumps around a lot. That's why I think it's hard for me to keep one straight point on everything that's going on. They bring in James Garretson, the fat Chucky looking doll that Joe explains. The only connection this guy has to any wildlife is that he owned animals when he was younger. He owned lions when he was younger. But again, it's because he had a lot of money. He owned a bunch of bars and strip clubs. But I don't get why they had to bring him in. If Jeff was saying he had all this money to kind of help out with everything, you had to bring in another investor to kind of make all this work. There's too many hands in the kitchen. I think Joe, if he was realistically wanted to keep this zoo going, should have just brought in one person and kept with it at that one person and kind of kept a level head about it. But they just kept bringing in more and more people, which becomes such a big issue because you can't have all these people controlling one thing. He apparently knew Joe for the past 20 years. They were friendly, but they weren't really acquaintances, which I don't get why you would want to bring in anyone that you don't trust or know at this point, especially when dealing with animals that you love about. And then they convince this guy to help Joe open a pizza shop. Why do you want another endeavor that you're going into that's drawing you further and further away from the animals? Yes, he thought bringing in the pizza shop because people want to eat next to the tigers and lions and everything like that. But I don't get why you're delving yourself further and further out of the animal world when it's something you apparently truly care about. And I think one of the best lines is that Joe is trying to be bigger than he actually is. Joe thinks he is this entertainment guru. He thinks he's going to bring in millions and millions of dollars because of what he's doing with his videos and everything like that. And it just shows how disillusioned he is of himself. And it's upsetting to see that someone's able to farly remove themselves from who they are just because they think. Because they have, he's brought, again, rambling, but he's brought this support staff, and I think since losing most of that support staff, he lost who he was. So he goes, I don't know who I am anymore. I thought I was an entertainment director, so I think the entertainment's going to fill that void of who was around me and who I think I am. And then, which again, this episode keeps showing further and further how he loses himself. He wants this presidential career. He thinks he has a chance. He thinks there's no way in hell that he could lose any bit of this. It's just another, I think I put down another fame maneuver. He's trying to put himself on a higher platform just so he can make more and more money through this. I think he thinks that he's going to put himself on a platform to help the big cats, but even throughout all this, he doesn't really discuss anything that he's going to do to help the animals that are out there. Let alone his presidential videos that he has out there. It's just reminiscent of what Trump is and what I think he thought he could do because he saw Trump out there. He goes, I can do that too. No, there's no way if this man's going to get out there, I'm going to get out there. But it's just that he gets even bigger because shows like John L. Oliver put him on there, and granted, I'm not blaming these shows for giving Joe an even bigger head than he had, but I mean, it didn't help him in any sense because now he's seeing he's getting national fame from all of this. And then in walks Joshua Dial. That's okay. Joshua Dial is the campaign manager. This guy has apparently some kind of background in the government, but he worked as a gun manager at the Walmart. So I don't know how much of this is actually true, that he had any politics or any more knowledge on politics than Joe did, which I guess he did to a point because he kind of helped Joe steer in the right direction for certain things that he was doing. But this man, again, is only in it to get public fame for himself, because he even said it was the worst experience of his life. Granted, this was his dream job to run a presidential campaign, but how fucked up in the head do you have to be like, all right, I've watched these videos on Joe and I know what he's about, but I'm willing to take on this shit show just to make money. You know this guy most likely doesn't have any money, or you kind of know what you're getting yourself involved with. Like, what's the point in any sense of involving yourself with this just to get yourself in it to shake hands with the bigger ups in the politics? That's not going to happen. You know this guy isn't going to make it anywhere. What was the point of doing that? Putting it on a resume? It's not going to look any better. Yes, you know, most likely he knew he was going to get in front of a camera to be interviewed, so he's hoping that would get him a little more stardom. But again, it just shows everyone in the show is out for themselves, which is ridiculous. When the show's supposed to be focusing on the animals and the rights of the animals, it just focuses more on the shit show of everyone else. And Joe inevitably realizes that he isn't going to be able to make it to the presidency, so he makes it his decision to turn out to be a governor, because I guess he realizes on a smaller scale maybe he could do something. His biggest thing was passing out condoms with his face on it, because he didn't want everyone to be screwed by the politics that are already out there. Again, he's just trying to make more and more of an entertainment of himself than he actually is. Like, people don't think you're this great person. They're laughing at you, and I don't know how much he realizes that people actually are laughing at him, or realizing he's all just a joke, and they're gonna vote in for him just like people voted in for Harambe and stuff like that. It's all just a political stunt at this point for him. People knew about a zoo, but they weren't going to be coming to the zoo because he was a candidate. And even Jeff mentions that no one's coming to see him because he's a candidate. They're coming for the animals at this point. No one's coming for him, even though Joe thinks people are. He's finding every angle for his entertainment. He's finding every outlet that he possibly can to fill the media for himself. He runs under a party that he has no idea what it's about, the Libertarian Party. He does nothing, yes, because he doesn't want any involvement with the government or anything like that, but I mean, if he was a smart enough man, he would kind of know that the two, and again, I'm not going to get too deep into politics, but the two parties that are going to be run are Democratic and Republican, but he just chooses a party that he thinks is going to help him lead a little further into his ideals, which I think is ridiculous. As his campaign manager, what are you doing? If you want this man to actually have a platform, why are you putting him in a dead-end party that isn't going to go anywhere? And then they cut to the Big Cats Public Safety Act. Carol is trying to be a huge proponent in all this. It just shows that, again, granted, she's trying to make it seem like she's in it for the animals, but again, she's trying to make herself seem like a martyr, trying to take down all these big guys and everything like that. Like, you didn't do anything to write the bill. You didn't do anything to help out with the bill. Just because you're talking about it, yes, again, conversation's a big deal with it, but you're not doing anything. You're not helping with any of it. You are one of those people that they would investigate to make sure that you're actually doing things correct, and you'd be shut down. So I don't know what's going on with that. Joe and Doc also say how this is so un-American and how they should have a free run with everything. But I mean, there's laws in place for a reason. You're in a country that has laws. Things have to run a certain way. If you're against them, you have to go somewhere else. The laws are set up very loosely for animals, but if you're all for it, you should be willing to follow these laws and help out with them. Granted, they think they're in America, they get to do what they want, they should be able to do what they want, and that's what most of these people following think that they should be doing. And Doc's whole thing of bringing animals to politicians, Carol understands their tactics, and she's right. She goes, how are these people going to go back on their word after playing with these animals to be like, I was wrong? No one's going to do that. No one's going to admit they're wrong at this point. And it sucks to a point, because I see her point where she wants to kind of show these politicians what's wrong and what you're doing is wrong, but it's not going to happen. I mean, it's just watching her being involved with the whole government thing. It blows my mind that she thinks she's going to be able to pop out of this with no issues. Then, like I said a little bit earlier, Joe thinks the politics are going to lead to more business to them. Yeah, you're getting your name out there, but I mean, no one's going to come here and think, man, this guy knows how to run a zoo, he's going to be able to run the country. I mean, we already have someone in office that people think knew how to run a business, going to be able to run a country. I mean, and that's most of the people that are backing him, I think, are kind of backing the same type of people. And then Jeff even brings up the fact that Joe needs to stop doing what he's doing. He needs to focus on the animals. Again, that should have been another ticking point for Joe to be like, look, how far removed am I from actually caring for these animals that I'm only focusing on myself? But I think he's so wrapped up in himself that he doesn't want to admit that he's too far gone. They also they bring up, this is where I think this is the point of the episode, and I think the point where Joe starts to really snap and he thinks everyone's out to get him, and he's really realizing how many bridges he's actually burned in his life just to get to where he's at. Alan, the one guy that I mentioned earlier, constantly, they're going back and forth against each other. Joe doesn't like him, Alan doesn't like him, and it's just weird how this dynamic changes a little bit later with everything. So I just wanted to bring up that point, how they show how much hatred they have for each other, which is obviously a power move made by Jeff to have his own crony in there and to show Joe that I'm the king of this zoo now, you are not, so you need to step down because I'm going to be taking over everything that's here. Joe's disillusion of, I don't know how true it is because I don't know. I think animals are attracted to pheromones, so that whole idea of that there was cologne on his shoes. I mean, could he be right? Possibly. Could they have put something on his shoes to kind of get those lions and everything attracted to him? But this is a breaking point, I think, for a lot of people to see that Joe stopped caring about these animals at that point. He's being dragged and everything like that, and granted, I think I'd be freaking out too if I was being dragged by a lion and trying everything to get off of him. But he's beating them and then firing a gun at them and saying, I'm going to shoot you in the head and blah, blah, blah. If you go back to the first episode, he said, I'd rather shoot someone coming in here than shoot one of my lions. You would think if he's so broken at this point that he's willing to take out the animals because he's so frustrated at himself, and I think that's the biggest issue. He's so frustrated at who he's become that he doesn't know where to turn at this point. He realizes that no one's in there to come and help him to save him, so he's wondering, what did I do wrong? How do I get out of this? And he doesn't. He just keeps digging a deeper and deeper hole for himself. He's lost all of his support. He has no one there. He has nothing there. So I feel he's feeling such a hopelessness. He thought his biggest support also were these animals. He had these animals to turn back on, and now they're turning on him. Who does he have? What does he have to do? He thought he had everything, and I think he's realizing now that he has nothing. And then the biggest meme I think that came out of this one is Carol talking about the sardine oil comment. Like, come on, why would you make that kind of comment about putting stuff on that? Because why do you need to make that kind of comment about it? That just, I think, it indicts you a little bit more that maybe you did kill your husband. And then the next biggest bombshell on this show is that John and Travis, Joe's two husbands, aren't actually gay. It just shows how much of a power movie had on all the people here. They definitely felt like they were trapped, and you realize how many drugs and gifts he was pumping with these people, and it just shows that he preyed on everyone he possibly could to make his goals and dreams come true. He didn't care about who was hurting, who was changing, what kind of life he was affecting. Granted, do I think he loved these guys? I think absolutely. Do I think these guys loved him to a sense? I think absolutely too. I think drugs and the idea of the cult can kind of, his whole ideal, I'm calling it cult because he kind of did and everything, but I think this idea of feeling trapped, you don't know where to turn, and again, I think this whole thing, Joe's feeling trapped at this point throughout the season, and I think he was making sure he could, I think I put down, he was making sure he could control their love, and I think that's what he was trying to do throughout all aspects of his life. He wanted to control everything that he had around him, just so he could be up higher and higher as he possibly could. Joe admitted his drug usage, which I think is a little, again, hypocritical, because he talked about earlier in his magic shows that drugs are bad, okay, and that you're going to make nowhere in life and everything like that, but at least he admits to doing the drugs, and he doesn't really admit to supplying the drugs, because I think he doesn't want to admit that he was willing to do anything to keep people there around him. Joe's holding all the cards, no matter what, in all of aspects of his life, he's holding the cards, and he, again, going back, he doesn't realize that he's losing all this power, and he's realizing, and I think this is a turning point in his life, that he's realized the two men that he loved the most aren't actually gay, and why are they actually here with me if they aren't actually into who I am? They both, Travis and John, just both admit to not being gay. They both admit to sleeping with other women. John has a child with one of the receptionists on there, and it's his whole comment of, I fell in love with straight guys. Why would you be willing, that's another part of his power trip. He's willing to go so far into taking something that isn't supposed to be, not supposed to be, but isn't, like someone that is supposed to be straight, and he's like, I can find a way to do that, I can find a way to change it. It's like he finds every challenge he possibly can to fill some kind of empty void I think he has in his life, that he needs something to do to kind of keep him in control. And then I think the saddest part of this whole thing is Travis killing him. I'm gonna say killing himself because I think personally it was a suicide. A lot of people are saying it's an accident, blah blah blah. But he admits to the political director that he has that he feels trapped. He doesn't know what to do. He doesn't have enough drugs. He doesn't have enough love. And even a little bit before that, it shows Travis being so upset because Joe isn't listening to him. Travis knew what that gun could do. He knew how it worked. He knew that gun was going to go off, and it's upsetting to see that he had to get so far into that point of putting a gun to his head to go, okay, this is the only way out. It's just there's not much more on it that I think I gotta say before getting upset, because it's just watching someone that Joe had loved and supposedly had a loving relationship with think this is the only way out because I'm so trapped that I'm going to have to do this. And because he's sitting under the camera, I don't think there's any other way that it wasn't a suicide. I'd like to hear your opinions on it to see if you think it's not. If you don't want to debate something on that, I completely understand, but I think it was something, and it shows even more how Joe wasn't in this for anybody but himself. He was willing to hurt someone he loved so much and not really focus on how he's feeling, and that was the only way he felt he could make his way out of such a terrible situation. And it just keeps showing that Joe goes to this funeral and he's singing, he's performing, he's not there to grieve, he's not there to do anything, he's not there, he's just there for himself. And I don't get how he could get so wrapped up in himself that he loved this man so much, and all he can think about is, okay, I'm going to sing a song so someone can see how well of an entertainment I am. And then even Travis's mom thinks he's acting. I mean, come on. It's hard not to think that Joe has been he's been putting on an act for so much of his life. Why wouldn't he continue? Why wouldn't he continue this caricature of himself of being, I'm Joe Exotic, I don't actually, why should I show I have any feelings for anybody but myself? And even a little bit further, he shows, even during the Thanksgiving thing, where he's kind of showing that he's upset that Travis is gone, but then he cuts right back into him talking about his politics, saying that he's third in the polls to win. I mean, where he's all over the place. Where are you? Like, I get grieving is a hard process, but again, in it for yourself. You're not in it for what happened. A lot of the people were saying throughout the show that Joe's demeanor changed, but I really don't think it did. I mean, Joe was possibly upset a little bit more, but throughout his entire time, he's still pushing for his political campaign. He's not pushing for the safety of the zoo or the future of the zoo. He's only doing what he thinks is best for himself, which, again, you have to look out for yourself at the end of the day. But I mean, he's just using this platform and his sadness and his tragedy to kind of push people's emotions to vote for him and kind of make him where he's at. At this point in the series, also, Jeff leaves the zoo to go to Vegas to make this whole jungle bus and everything, and then realizes that's not going to work, so I'm going to come back to the zoo. And then a month later, I'm not saying everyone has a little bit of time to grieve, but Joe instantly finds someone else that he can kind of bring into his harem and be like, look, now I have someone to control again that I know for sure is going to love me, which I think is upsetting. Again, this man has to go out there to find someone to control to make himself feel this love. He's just bringing another pawn into it, and the whole idea that he invited Travis's mom, which I guess in his head he thought maybe, oh, this is a good idea to show her that I still care about her, but the fact that it was two people, his mom and the cameraman, was a little weird. And even throughout all this grieving and everything, Joe's still running for governor. There's no stopping this shit show train that he's going to go and be a governor. He mentions here and there he wants to get the crooked politics out so he can get the animals into a better position, but there's no focus, and I think this is more so an issue with the documentary. There's no focus on what Joe actually believes about it. It's just he wants this big platform to have for his ego. He obviously loses the campaign. He was I think 17%, which is insane to think he even got 17% of the vote. But I mean, look at who we have in office at this point. Let's see. A lot of people think at this point is where Joe's losing his path. Have they not been paying attention to what's been going on with him? If you were that concerned about him losing his path, you should have, Alex mentioned that no one's going to step up against him. But I mean, all maybe it could have taken was him to be like, hey, Joe, maybe this is an issue. You're straying too far from what you actually wanted to do. What about the animals? What about the zoo? What about everything? And I think the keepers kind of talk about it like the zoo just went to straight shit. And like everything wasn't being upkept, and Joe loses his passion completely. You can see it throughout the series that it's just a consistent downtrod of who he was and what he wanted. I think that's kind of why he lost his path. He realized he wasn't achieving what he wanted with these animals, so he thought, let me just shoot off into another direction. But you can't just leave all that behind you. You can't leave the animals behind you to leave in someone else's pocket to take care of. Like that shouldn't have been your issue. Joe at this point keeps getting more and more paranoid, which I think is rightfully so, because they do find the microphone and antenna. I don't know how, and they don't really explain how or who or why it got there. It's most likely some point of the FBI, because they're the ones doing the research. And then they go into the beginning of the research. Is the end of the show, which starts the next part of the next episode. Is Jeff Lowe and the federal agent calls and everything, which I think is a little sketchy. Like, I get they're calling him because he's the owner of the zoo, but how much knowledge did Jeff have about this before Joe started getting in trouble? And Joe thinks like, oh, this is the opposite way around. Jeff thinks this is all over for Joe. Like Jeff thinks this is it for Joe, and there's no way Joe is going to get out of this. But you also own the zoo. He's an employee of you at this point. You should also be thinking it yourself and what kind of got you into this mess. And again, no one's at this point is talking about what is going to be the outcome of the animals. Where are the animals going at this point? If Joe gets shut down, they're technically Joe's animals. They're not Jeff's animals. Jeff has his own. So who's going to be taking care of this? Who's going to take over? What's going to happen to these animals? And I think that's the biggest issue of a lot of these episodes is there's no outcome talk about the animals. There's no next step plan of what's going to happen to them. They just think, oh, all these people are going to go down, but what's going to happen to the zoo? It's already going into deterioration. It's already looking like shit. They're already losing customers, it looks like, at this point, because Joe is focused so much on his governor run and everything like that. So why isn't this documentary focusing more on what's going on with the animals and what could be done more to kind of help these animals out? Again, I keep saying it's upsetting because it is. I mean, this documentary is supposed to be showing more about how to care for these animals and how to kind of create more area, more talk, and more conservation on them, but there's nothing actually that's about it. It's literally a reality show at this point. It's the reality show that they're filming. The documentary, the whole documentary on big cats has kind of just gone by the wayside just so they can pump up the views with this. Again, I'm glad this documentary came out because I think it's a good shedding light on what big issues are, but they don't focus on pretty much anything with it towards a little bit the end of the series, but there's not much actually being discussed about it. So yeah, this episode, I don't think this was a great review on it, which I openly want your opinion on what it was. But again, it's getting a little harder to kind of talk about anything when they're not focusing on the animals and the experts and everything. But again, I think the biggest issue with this documentary is they're not bringing up any big issues with the big cats besides maybe talking about the cub petting and stuff like that. But they really don't explain too much about anything. Like, they don't bring in any, like, conservationists or any, like, scientists on it and kind of explain it, which I think they should have. But yeah, episode 6 will probably come out a little bit either tomorrow or towards Friday at this point, but I'll definitely get both of 6 and 7 filmed at some point throughout this week. Thanks for watching. Catch you guys a little later.